So let's talk about carbon capture and storage. Is it the climate-saving tech we've been waiting for, or is it falling dangerously short of the hype? We're going to dig into DNV's latest forecast to figure out exactly where CCS is today and, more importantly, where it's headed. And right off the bat, DNV, they're a global risk management firm, makes a really bold claim. They say the turning point for CCS has arrived. So they're not saying it's on the horizon. They're saying it's here, right now. But, what does that actually mean on the ground? Well, it means we're looking at this kind of wild paradox. On one hand, the growth is just explosive. We're talking about a quadrupling of capacity by 2030. That's huge. But, and this is the big but, even with that incredible speed, we're still falling way, way short of what we actually need to hit our net zero targets. All right, so let's really get into this. Why are we calling it a turning point? And just how big is this gap we keep talking about? Okay, here's the number that really puts everything into perspective. Even with all this rapid growth, all the investment, DNV's most likely forecast shows that by 2050, CCS will only capture about 6% of our global CO2 emissions. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a massive leap from where we are today, but it's a long, long way from being a complete solution, right? So to really get why it's so tough to scale this stuff up, we've got to understand the tech itself. How does this whole process of capturing and storing carbon dioxide actually work? Okay, at its heart, the idea behind CCS is pretty simple. It's really just a bunch of technologies that do one main thing. They grab CO2 emissions right at the source, stop them from getting into the atmosphere, and then stick them somewhere safe, pretty much forever. And you can really break it all down into 3 key steps. Step 1, you capture the CO2, usually right from a big industrial plant. Step 2, you transport it. And step 3, you store it, locking it away deep underground in these stable geological formations. Now, that first step, capture, is where things get really interesting, because it's not a one-size-fits-all deal. You've got these 4 main approaches. Post-combustion, that's what most of us picture, right? Scrubbing CO2 from smokestacks. But check out inherent capture. In some industries, like ethanol or ammonia production, the CO2 is already a super clean, easy-to-separate byproduct. And that makes it way, way cheaper and easier to grab. That detail is actually super important. Okay, so once you've got the CO2, you have to move it. Pipelines are really the workhorse here. In the US, they've been using them for decades, mostly for something called enhanced oil recovery, basically pumping CO2 into old oil wells to get more oil out. But if you need more flexibility, say for longer distances, you can use specially designed ships, trains, or even trucks for smaller projects. So, we've covered the how: capture, transport, store. But that brings us to the why. Why go through all this trouble? It's complicated, it's expensive. So why is it considered so crucial? Well, it's all about going after the emissions that pretty much nothing else can touch. And this right here is the absolute key. CCS was never meant to be a silver bullet for our entire emissions problem. Its real superpower is being a specialized tool for the toughest nuts to crack. Those hard-to-decarbonize sectors where just switching to wind and solar, well, it just isn't an option. And this shows you exactly what we're talking about. I mean, take cement. Just the chemical reaction of making cement releases a ton of CO2. It doesn't matter how you heat the kiln. Same story for steel, and for a lot of chemical production. For these industries, capturing those emissions is one of the only ways to clean up their act. So if we look at the breakdown for the near future, say 2030, you can see that the natural gas industry is still the biggest user of CCS. It makes up more than 1/3 of all the carbon being captured. And that makes sense, right? They've been using the technology for a while already. But now, watch this. When we jump ahead to 2050, the whole picture just flips on its head. Suddenly, manufacturing is the dominant player, accounting for 41% of all CCS. This is that hard-to-decarbonize niche we were just talking about, playing out right in front of us. It's a huge shift in how the tech is going to be used. Okay, so this all begs a pretty obvious question, right? If CCS is so critical for these industries, why isn't it scaling up even faster to fill that massive gap we saw at the beginning? Let's take a look at the roadblocks. And boom, here it is, straight from the CEO of DNV Energy Systems. The single biggest barrier? It isn't the technology. It's not even the price tag. It's policy uncertainty. Think about it. Shifting political priorities, a lack of stable, long-term financial support. That stuff has killed way more CCS projects than any engineering problem ever has. It's the #1 reason for that huge gap between the forecasts and our climate goals. And beyond the policy roller coaster, there are other pretty serious hurdles. The costs are still high, though they are expected to come down. The track record for projects isn't great. A lot have failed historically. And even the ones that are up and running have often underperformed their targets. Plus, you have this massive logistical headache. The capture plant, the pipeline, and the storage site all have to be developed in perfect sync. That's a huge risk. All right, so now that we have a much clearer picture of the technology and its challenges, let's circle back to the numbers and see what the future really holds according to this forecast. So here's where we are right now. Today, across the whole world, we capture and store about 41 million tons of CO2 a year. Just kind of lock that number in your head for a second, 41 million. Now, look at DNV's most likely forecast for 2050. That number jumps from 41 million to 1,300 million tons. That's 1.3 gigatonnes. I mean, that is a staggering, more than 30-fold increase. The scale-up is absolutely happening. But here's the real kicker. To actually get on track for net zero emissions, we would need to take that already massive 2050 number and multiply it by another 6. 6 times. That is the gap we're talking about. It just shows you the mind-boggling scale of the challenge ahead. So, who's actually driving the growth that we are seeing? Well, this chart makes it super clear. For the next several years, up to 2030, it's really North America and Europe leading the charge, mostly because of supportive policies like the Inflation Reduction Act in the US. So, what's the bottom line here? It's this. CCS isn't some fantasy technology. It's a necessary tool, and it's already scaling up fast. But this DNV forecast is a major reality check. If we're serious about closing that huge gap to net zero, then policy and investment have to kick into a much, much higher gear. And that really leaves us with the final and most important question. The forecast shows us what's likely to happen if we just keep on the current path. It doesn't show what needs to happen. And since policy is the main lever we have to pull, the future of CCS really boils down to one thing. Are governments around the world going to step up and act decisively enough to actually close that gap?